DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is we are going into what will be a three-part series where I'm going to debunk this concept of toxic masculinity. I'm going to explain where it came from, what people mean by it, and I'm going to break it down the bullshit that has been framed around it, or the frame that has been built around it that turned it into bullshit. But before we do any of that, let me remind you of two things. First of all, my text message number down below in the description. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. All the things that I talk about here, all the skills and abilities and knowledge and objectivity and ability to break things down that I display when here on this show. If you would like me to personally coach you on applying these in your personal life and your professional life, or a combination of both, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can have me as your direct coach, and we will take it from there. Getting into this topic of toxic masculinity. Again, this is the first of a three-part series. Everybody here has heard of the subject. Everybody has heard of the phrase. Maybe you have been accused of being a toxic masculine person. Maybe you have accused others of it. Either way, that's all right. Today, what I'm going to do is help clear things up. In this three-part series, we're going to dive into the nonsense that the phrase itself has unfortunately become. First, let me give a definition of the phrase. This is coming straight from the website verywellmind.com. It's also a lot about a lot of mindset subjects, and they define things out. So I want to make sure we are all on the same page. Here's the definition. Quote, toxic masculinity refers to a collection of offensive, harmful beliefs, tendencies, and behaviors rooted in traditional male roles but taken to an extreme. This dangerous idea of open quote manliness, close quote, perpetuates domination, homophobia, and aggression, and can be harmful to the mental health of all genders. It can also have serious social consequences, which is how it became known as toxic masculinity, period, close quote. Now, what we will do in this series is go over 9 specific aspects that have been highlighted as endemic to what they call toxic masculinity. I'm going to tell you what they say. These are people who have framed themselves as experts on the subject. I'm going to tell you what they say, then tell you why what they're saying is bullshit. Everybody got it? Again, 3-part series. Point number 1. The topic, once again, is breaking down and debunking this concept of toxic masculinity. Number 1, the first trait. So how I'm going to lay this out is I'm going to lay out the traits that the people who call toxic masculinity. I'm going to tell you the 9 traits that they say make a man toxic and his masculine, and then how they briefly describe what it means, and then I'm going to tell you why it's some nonsense. Got it? So I'm going to name the thing. I'm going to tell you how they describe it, and then I'm going to tell you why it's bullshit. Point number 1 is toughness. This is the first thing that they say. Any man who is in his toxic masculinity, he is thinking that toughness is a positive trait to have. That's what they're saying. And they say, this is what they say about toughness, that men should be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. All right, I'm telling you that these are not shoulds. They are the biological wiring of males. They're not a should. I'm not going to walk up to a man and say, you should be physically strong, you should be emotionally callous, and you should be behaviorally aggressive. And you also got to be very careful with the language. Be very careful in your listening to the language that's being used here. The way that they word things is very important, because you can word things in a certain way, such as to give it a negative or a positive connotation just based on the language you choose to use to describe the exact same thing. And this is what a lot of people these days who are causing our society to go backwards, to go in the wrong direction. I talked about the feminization of society, the removal of standards of society. All of this is based on people who are really smart, who are really good with words, and are really clever in how they put words together to make a thing sound better or worse than it actually is based on the language. So, for example, you want to get an example of this. Gender affirming care is very tricky language that is the same as gender dysmorphia or child mutilation. Or a woman's right to choose is the same as a woman's right to kill a baby in the womb that they voluntarily created. You notice when you change the language, it changes the way that you perceive the entire situation, even though we're talking about the exact same thing. So it's not a should. That again, physically strong, emotionally callous, behaviorally aggressive. This is just what men are wired to be. It doesn't mean you should be that all the time and in every situation, but it's part of the male wiring. Compared to females, males are physically stronger. Does everybody agree with that? So for a man to be physically strong, compared to what? Of course a man should be physically strong. Again, compared to what? There's a man and a woman in the house and there's a big box that needs to be lifted. Who should be lifted? The man or the woman? You only got two choices. All right, so compared to a woman, a man is physically strong. There's nothing wrong with this. How is this part of the listing of what makes a man toxic? Is complete bullshit. This is what they're starting with. This is their first point. Okay, so what are you comparing him to? Yes, the man is strong. When it comes to emotionality, this concept of stoicism and having control over your emotions, men tend to be more rational and more logical. I'm not saying there are not exceptions to that. There are men who are completely irrational and illogical in at different points. Okay, so anybody wants to push back on that, I just gave you the pushback for you, so you don't have to say it. And women tend to be more emotional and reactive. Again, are there exceptions to that? Yes, there are. And at different times, men and women can vacillate into both categories. It's not a crazy thing for me to say it and to express it as a general tendency of both men and women, nor is it outside of the realm of most of our anecdotal experiences that men tend to be more rational and more logical and women tend to be more emotional and more reactive. That is I think most of us, our lived experience, that's how it is. Why? Because this is the way men and women are wired. It's part of our wiring as humans. Doesn't even matter where we're from. And again, this is not to say the woman can't be logical and the woman can't be rational. It's not to say the man cannot become emotionally unhinged, because we know that those things absolutely do happen. When speaking in generalities, however, is this true? The answer is yes, it is. Of course it's true. So to label this as toxic is nonsense, because again, what are you comparing it to? When we're labeling things as toxic, what are you comparing? You're comparing it to other women, you're comparing it to some perfect version of a man. And who's the one who are the people who are laying these points out? They're usually either women who are supportive of feminism, or they are feminine energy men who are basically saying that a man should be more in his feminine. In other words, the closer that a man gets to being like a woman, the better of a man that he is. And there's a whole lot of emotional blackmail to go into that, because what these feminized men do is they say, well, what makes you a real man is to be less of these things that are part of your natural wiring, part of your natural base instincts that you as a male feels. The further away you get from that, the more you're being a real man and the less toxic you become. Again, there are men out there, feminine energy men. Another word I use to describe them are pussies. These pussies who are trying to tell other men to be more like women, which makes you more of a man. That's bullshit. And then there are women, of course, who are preaching this. But when the men start preaching it, it makes it more worse. It makes it more poisonous when a man does it, because if a woman is telling me something about how to be a man, I can easily dismiss her as, you don't know anything about being a man. You don't have a penis. Shut the hell up. But when a man is saying it and a man is telling you to your face that this makes you more of a man, it can be more confusing, especially if you're impressionable and you're listening to a man who has some level of influence over you for whatever reason. That's what makes this more pernicious. And this is the reason why feminine energy men, next to moralizers, are my two least favorite types of human beings. So where this really becomes problematic is in telling men that they should be more like females, as I just explained, or generally socializing men to be more like women, which again means be more in touch with your feelings, express your feelings more often, act out your feelings, make your decisions based on how you feel, meaning doing more or doing less based on how you feel energetically and emotionally. And you combine that, here's where it becomes an issue. When you combine that emotionality with the male physicality, it creates serious social issues. You see, a woman in a strong energetic state, there's only so much damage that a woman can do, because women don't have the physicality that a man does. A man with a male physicality but female emotions becomes a very dangerous individual. This is where we get sexual assaulters. This is where we get school shooters. This is not from men who know how to control their emotions. This is from men who don't know how to control their emotions. And again, it's way different when a woman is in that state. She doesn't have the same instincts and physicalities that a man has. Man with those instincts and physicalities without a lack of emotional control becomes a very dangerous individual. And when we are preaching to men from these idiots who are telling you that this is what makes you less toxic and more of a quote unquote man, or real man, as they like to say, this is sending people in the wrong direction. So this is why I got to speak and make sure that this is being said, that none of you men are being fooled by this bullshit. Or if you have been being fooled up to this point, let me let you know that you're being fooled so that you don't keep getting fooled. As the men who cannot control their emotions, the men who allow their emotions to flow the same way that a woman would, those are the most dangerous members of society. The woman cannot inflict the damage that a man can inflict. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is debunking the nonsense that has become labeled as toxic masculinity. Number 2 is the concept of anti-femininity, defined as men should, again, this is what they say that makes you toxic. Men should reject traditionally feminine behaviors such as showing emotion and accepting help. Okay, so again, beware of the language. See, this language is very tricky. It's very manipulative language. I understand why they're doing it. I respect their hustle. And at the same time, it's bullshit. Let me explain. This connects directly to what we just talked about in the first point. Showing emotion and seeking and accepting help are traditionally feminine behaviors. And a man's and I'm saying that I'm making that as a statement. Showing emotion and every emotion you have, you wearing it on your sleeve, those are traditionally feminine behaviors. And seeking and accepting help when there's a challenge in front of you, again, that tends to be the woman's leaning. They have a problem, they first go try to seek help. That when a man has a problem, the first instinct of a man is to try to solve the problem. Any men in here who are in a relationship with a woman, or any woman who's in a relationship with a man, anytime the woman comes to the man and shares a problem, what is the natural instinct of the man? Women know the answer to this question because it sometimes annoys you. And men, you know the answer to this question because you know exactly what you're going to do. When your wife or girlfriend comes to you and expresses a problem, the first thing you try to do is solve the problem. And what do women often say? I don't always need you to solve the problem. I just want to vent and tell you how I feel. I'm just expressing my emotions. Men don't tend to do that. We tend to express things because we are looking for a solution to the problem. When a man faces a problem, the first thing we usually do is try to figure it out and solve it. That is a man's natural instinct. That does not make you toxic. And again, this is it's very disturbing that they're trying to frame this as if it's some type of negative thing. There's nothing negative about this. A man's first job is to manage and control and direct his emotions. That's a man's job. Men have the same emotions that women have, sometimes even stronger than women have, because we have the physicality to act out on those emotions in ways that women do not. Our job is to manage those emotions and control and direct our emotions and channel them towards things that we want to use those emotions for. Instead of letting the emotions control us, we control them. I told you all about this. We call it the emotional management business. And a man's instinct, when he faces a challenge, whether it's one of his own making or one of his own mind or one that is presented to him, man's first instinct when he is connected to his masculine is to try to figure out and solve problems on his own before he goes looking for outside assistance. Because what makes a man feel more like a man, most like a man, I'm going to say this as a man myself, and any men here who disagree can let me know, that a man feels most like a man when he knows that any challenge that gets thrown in front of him, he'll be able to deal with it. And the people around him who depend on him for help, if they come to him with a challenge, he'll be able to deal with it. That's what makes you feel manly, knowing that you can solve things. And not for nothing, the women who are listening to this, if you have men in your life, or even if you don't, if you had a man in your life, isn't that the type of man you want? Don't you want a man around you that when you come to him and say, I have a challenge, I don't know what to do with it, can I tell you about it? And can you possibly fix it? And he can actually fix it. Doesn't that make you feel like you're with a man? Doesn't that make you feel more secure and safe around that man, knowing that he can solve the challenge when you bring it to him because you have not been able to solve it yourself? Are there any women out here who disagree with that? So why is this toxic? This is what's being labeled as toxic. And I want you all to understand, this is the kind of stuff that's being taught to your kids in schools. These are the kind of things that experts, quote unquote, experts and book authors and speakers and people who give seminars and give TED Talks, this is the kind of stuff that they're telling your kids. They're telling your young women this so that they're looking for men who don't do these things. Where you're really going to end up with another woman, and this is what they're telling your men, they're trying to turn them into females, and you're sending them to places where they're getting this message, and you're not offering a counter message. Well, where do you think the men in your world are going to end up if this is what they're getting every day? So this connects directly to what we were just talking about. As I just said, a man's first job is to manage, control, and direct his emotions, solve problems before he goes looking for help. Nothing wrong with acquiring help if and when you decide you want it or need it. But a man's first instinct is to solve his own problems. Now, there are many caveats to this help angle, as I just said. One of them, I just shared one of them. Depends on what the situation is and what type of help we are talking about. But we generally accept, from both males and females, that a man who can solve problems is more attractive and appears to be a more effective and capable man than a man who cannot solve problems. And instead, whenever he's faced with a challenge, first thing he does is goes and tries to figure out how to get help rather than trying to figure things out on his own. Can we agree with this? Is this true or is it not true? Ladies, which man do you respect more? The man who you bring him a problem and he figures out how to solve it even though you couldn't, or the man who you bring him a problem, he says, well, I can't do anything either. Let's go together and try to find some help. Which man do you respect more? Which man is more capable in your eyes? Which man allows you to feel more like a woman? The man who can solve the problem or the man who cannot solve the problem? And instead needs to go looking for help. See, the concept of accepting help, there's nothing wrong with accepting help if and when a man needs it. At the same time, man doesn't always need help. If I'm dealing with something and some man comes over and wants to try to help me and I say, hey, I don't need your help, excuse me, back up. I got a right to do that. It doesn't make me toxic. The other day, as a matter of fact, I was returning some packages to the UPS store. There were some orders that got shipped to Amazon. My wife had ordered and needed to be returned. There were 3 boxes that were pretty nice sized boxes. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'4", and I had to pull these boxes out of the car. I had the boxes stacked up on top of each other, and they were like almost higher than my head. And I'm carrying all 3 boxes, and it was obvious that this was not going to be super easy for me to do. And the store was probably about, 50 yards away from where I parked. But I had determined by the time I got out the car, I'm going to get all 3 of these boxes to the UPS store in one trip. This is the kind of things that men do. Does that make me toxic? So I carried those boxes over, and I'm walking over, and I see this guy standing right in front of the door. He's like on a bicycle or something, and he stopped his bike. He sees me coming, and he's looking at me. He's looking at the door, and he didn't move. And he's looking at me. I guess he was guessing that maybe I might need some help, but he didn't get off the bike to actually try to help me. And then when I got over to the door, I pulled one hand off the boxes, leaned them up against the where the door was, the door frame, and I pulled the door open, and I could see out of my periphery that he was coming over to, I guess, offer some assistance. By the time he came over, I'd already opened the door and got in. I didn't even acknowledge him because he didn't do anything. And some people would say, well, that's toxic. Why don't you just ask the guy for help or let the guy come help you? Because I didn't need his fucking help. And again, this is just a man's way of thinking. Again, it's a small thing, but it's a good example that somebody might say, well, that's kind of you're leaning a little bit toxic there, Dre, because you didn't look for help or accept help, or you tried to do it all in one trip. Is that toxic? No, it's not toxic. How many men, listen to this, have ever gone to the grocery store, you had a whole bunch of bags in the car, and you got home, and you parked the car, you looked at all the bags in the car, and you looked at it, and you said, I'm going to get all these bags into the house in one trip. All right, we do that. It's fun. It's fun to challenge ourselves to see if we can get it all in one trip. And sometimes women even do this. Does this make you a toxic masculine females when you decide to do this exact same thing? So this whole concept of accepting help, the way that this is worded, again, it's manipulative language. That if a man says, I don't want any help, that he's somehow being toxic or he's somehow not admitting that he needs it. Well, maybe he doesn't fucking need it. And if you have a man in your life and a man tells you he doesn't need any help, it is your responsibility, men and women who are listening to this. If a man tells you he doesn't need help, your responsibility is to get the hell out the way and let him do what he says he can do. Now, if it turns out that he can't, then we'll see. But if he says he can and then he does it, then you got to shut up. Simple as that. So again, ladies, which man do you respect more? The man who says he can do it and at least tries, or the man who doesn't even try and just goes looking for help? Again, that accepting thing is a tricky word. The man who figures things out and solves them on his own without you even knowing that there was a problem in the first place. I think that's the man that women respect the most. You don't even know that he even had a problem, but he solved it. If you didn't know, then we can't really talk about it. But let's say later on you found out, damn, there was a problem. He didn't say anything. He solved it. Damn. You respect that without him even saying a word, right? So the man who comes to you asking for help, to help you, to have you help him solve a problem that you would expect him to solve on his own, how much can you respect that man? How safe and secure do you feel around that man? Again, and these are your toxic men according to what I've researched that I've done. I don't even need to wait for your answer. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is we're debunking this concept of toxic masculinity. Number 3, power. This is the third thing that toxic men are looking for, power. Men should work towards obtaining power and status, socially and financially, and thus gain the respect of others. Now, again, that's the description of what a toxic man does. He's working to obtain power, working to obtain status, social and financial status, and thus, because of those things, he will have the respect of other people. What they're saying is any man who thinks like that is toxic. Again, let me ask the question. Is there anyone in this listening audience, male or female, who respects a man who does not work towards obtaining power and social status and financial status? Is any of you who wants a man who is not interested in those things? Ladies? Is any woman listening to this who's not interested in a man who is looking to obtain power, social status, and financial status? Power meaning the ability to influence situations and other people. Social status meaning he is respected by other people in the group. And financial status means he has financial resources, meaning he can get things done with his money. Is any of you ladies interested in a man who is not interested in those things? A man who says, well, I don't want any power. I don't want any social status amongst people, and I don't care about having financial ability. Any of you ladies interested in that kind of man? Does that arouse you, ladies? I don't think so. So at the same time, let me remind you again, this is what they're labeling as toxic masculine. Any man interested in these things is toxic. You tell me, where's this coming from? Where did this come from? No man or woman respects a man who's not interested in those things. That's not to say that a man needs to be only interested in those things. Not to say the man's entire life needs to revolve around those things. Wouldn't make him wrong if it did. But no one's interested in a man who's not interested in those things, because the man's not going to be respected by other men. And in addition to the attention of females, men, and I speak as a man, men want to be respected and have status amongst other men. We want to know that other men who are somebody respect us as somebody. That's one of the things that makes a man a high value man, is that you are respected by other men who are also of value. And the work that you do gets reflected in how other men see you and the respect that you get, because they're at a status and they see you as a status, then you have the status. That's how it works. This is just the social dynamics of men. Same way that I've often heard women say that when they get dressed up and put on makeup and put on heels and all the things they do to make themselves look good, they don't do it necessarily for men's attention, even though they may get men's attention. Some women will say that they do it for themselves so that they feel good. But I would say often, if it's getting attention of anybody, women do that so that they can show off their status to other women more than they're showing it off to men. Now, again, I'm not a woman, so I can't speak from personal experience on this, but I've heard women say that. The point of all this is keep it on the subject at hand, which is the men. Are there any women listening to this who prefers a man who does not have the respect of other men? Are any of you interested in a man who's not respected by other men? Any of you ladies? All right, would you want to go out in public with a man who's not respected by other men? All right, how are you going to feel standing next to him when every other man you come across has no respect for the man whose arm you are on? Doesn't sound too fun to me. Would you rather have a man who is not respected by other men, who doesn't have money, or a man who is highly respected and does have money? If you just had to pick just based on that alone, you didn't know anything else, what kind of man do you want? I don't think anyone's picking a man who's not respected and doesn't have money. Even though, again, they may not be the most important things in the world to you or to that man, do you respect a man more if he has them or if he doesn't have them? That's my question. We're making this into a binary because this is the way it's been laid out. Are there any men listening to this who would prefer to be a nobody and have no money, or would you rather be a somebody who does have money? Again, I don't think there's a single man who'd rather be a nobody with no money. And again, when I say nobody and somebody, I'm talking relative to the spaces in which you would like to engage. You don't have to be a somebody everywhere. You don't have to be like so famous you can't walk through the mall. But do you want to be a somebody in your spaces, in your social circles? Do you want to be a man of significance, or do you want to be a man of insignificance? You want to be a man with resources or a man without resources? No one's picking the other one. No one's picking the person without resources and without respect. So how does this make you toxic? So what I really want you all to think about as I'm breaking these things down is, how does this make you toxic, and why would anyone want to influence a man to think that these are bad things? I want you to ask yourself that question rhetorically. Why would anyone want to encourage this? They're trying to build a society of weak men. They're trying to build a society of men who are more like women. That's what they're trying to do. What that's going to do is destroy all of society. It's going to make us a very weak society, and we got a bunch of weak men running it, and or we have women running it. What I want you all to understand is, when you look at these things that society is trying to force upon you, how ridiculous they sound as I'm reading them out and explaining them. And when you just say them out loud and consider them in any type of logical way, how ridiculous do these things sound? And they're being labeled as toxic. For a man to seek social status and to want to have resources and respect amongst other people, that's toxic. Again, what is the antidote to this toxicity? To not seek status, just be who you are, not care about status at all, and not seek financial resources, not want to have any power or influence. Again, I'm just asking the women, how many of you are attracted to that type of man? So where is this coming from? Again, who are these people who are coming up with these ideas? Let's recap today's class. This is just part 1 of 3, debunking the concept of toxic masculinity. Number 1 is, these are the traits that they list as toxic. Number 1, toughness. Men wanting to be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. These are just the base desires of men. These are just our natural instincts and natural wirings. Doesn't mean we should just let them run wild and do things in a crazy way, but we need to learn how to channel these instincts into positive things. All three of these things I'm 100% in line with. I go to the gym every day to be physically strong. I like having a six pack. I like being ripped. I like having muscles. I like being able to look like, even if I don't play sports anymore, if I told someone I did, they would believe me. That matters to me. Being emotionally callous. And again, callous is a tricky language word, a tricky language that they're using there. Emotionally under control, meaning I learn how to channel and control my emotions and not allow my emotions to control me. And men need to be able to do that a lot more than women need to be able to do it. And behaviorally aggressive. The word aggressive can mean several different things. Aggression is not necessarily a negative thing. It depends on how you're using it. You can be aggressive and going after what you want. And if you don't go after what you want, often in life you end up not getting it. So behaviorally aggressive, again, the way that it's worded, it could colloquially sound like a negative thing, but actually can be a positive thing, depending on how you channel your emotions. Point number 2, anti-femininity. That men reject toxic masculine men reject traditionally feminine behaviors such as showing emotion and accepting help. Again, this is manipulative language. Men need to control their emotions more than women do. Should men show emotions just as much or more than women? The answer is no, they should not. Okay, that's just my personal view on it. And how many of you women would rather a man who's more emotional than you are? All right, you wouldn't even feel like you're with a man if he was. I don't think for most of you. If I got that wrong, somebody can let me know. And accepting help. Again, the accepting help is tricky language there. I will go get help for certain things that I want help for, but the natural instinct of a man is to solve problems. Any man who's not capable of solving problems and immediately goes looking for help anytime he's faced with a challenge is not a true man, and most of you women will not be attracted to such a man. Number 3, power. Men work towards obtaining power and status, toxic men, obtaining power and status, socially, financially, and thus gaining the respect of others. Again, is there any man or woman who respects a man who's not interested in power, social status, and financial status? Is there any person who's interested in that type of man? Is there any man listening to this who wants to be that type of man? Is there any woman who is available right now who wants to date a man or marry a man who is not interested in being powerful, influential, having social respect amongst the group, and having financial resources? Any of you interested in that type of man? Is that what you're looking for in your dating profile? But these are toxic traits, according to what I found. Tomorrow, let's get into more of this. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com, folks. Work with me directly. Have me as your personal coach. And let's get your game, your outcomes, your power, your status, your respect amongst the group where it needs to be based on your performance and based on the way you bring your game to the table. That's all at WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all